Fortunate for me is that that's tied to a large business initiative, the idea of being ISO 27001 compliant. And so that also allows us the opportunity to upgrade our security program to the extent that if we are ISO 27001 compliant, it also helps the security of our overall program as well, so that we are able to have a better layered defense type of approach that involves the business, involves all the IT owners and control owners.
SC Media and our sponsor RegScale are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100 plus members of the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. Hi, it's great to be here today with Greg B., CISO at Haggerty Insurance. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great to have you here. You and I have known each other for a while and have seen each other at different events and so forth. And so what is it, though, that got you interested in the cybersecurity space?
Gosh, I've been in the cybersecurity space now for 24 years. So back in the year 2000 at Country Financial first started a security department. And at that point, I just wanted to get into management and climb the corporate ladder and so forth. And at Country Financial, it was really, you have to go into management to be able to do that. And so I was an application developer, an application security project manager, and a supervisor of an application area at the time. And the job came up for information security at the advent of the internet and e-commerce days back at Country Financial, and applied for the position and was selected. And in the job description, even though it was a manager level, it's in fine details, it said acts as the organization CISO. So it tells you a little bit about how backwards it was at that time in regards of what the CISO, no one knew what the CISO was supposed to do at that point, just that they needed to have one. So I really got into security as a management position. At the time, really, I didn't know security as, basically it was application security, but I don't think I've been exposed to. So luckily for me, no one else knew what I was supposed to do either. And so I was able to grow the program there with a lot of, basically research and hiring. So a lot of things that we did at Country Financial was really from that grassroots standpoint, simply because information security and CISO role was just so new at the time.
It's interesting to see how this has evolved. I mean, I wrote the first professional book on CISO leadership for IC Squared back in 2008. And then with the CISO Compass, the latest book, it's like twice the size of the other book, and it was a complete rewrite because the role had changed so much. And now nowadays every organization or most organizations realize that they need a CISO that's of any certain size. But we've had to mature that, haven't we?
We have, and it's really changed. I think that a lot of CISOs today are more on the risk management side and really trying to align their programs to the business initiatives and really getting away from a technical focus in regards of how they approach their entire program. Certainly, we got to have technical folks within the program itself to basically do controls and the technologies and so forth. But I think for the most part, the CISO role has changed such as it's a risk management, aligning with the business, being able to talk to the boards. And so really, if you've been in the CISO world for as long as I have, you've really had to change and mature in a different way in order to succeed long term with the business. Because, back in the day, we were, kind of seen as the Department of No, basically trying to protect everything. Whereas, we've had to mature past that and be able to have conversations where we're actually part of the yes and part of the solution to move things forward for the business. So that takes a little bit different skill set. I think a lot of CISOs have been able to migrate and mature towards that. And I think that's the success of being able to adapt to new challenges. And I think the CISO role has had many challenges, such that we'd have to mature our business acumen as we move forward.
RegScale is a continuous controls monitoring platform purpose-built to deliver fast and efficient GRC outcomes by bridging security, risk, and compliance. Organizations using RegScale improve the ROI of existing tools, achieve rapid certifications like FedRAMP, SOX, and SOC 2, anticipate threats, automate evidence collection, integrate compliance into DevSecOps, and map controls faster using AI and OSCL native functionality. RegScale's customers report a 90% faster path to certifications and a 60% reduction in audit preparation efforts. To find out more about RegScale, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/RegScale. I think that whole evolution is so important, and that's why I devoted a whole chapter to that, to a 6-stage evolution, because we started out as this technical department, and then we moved into the governance, risk, compliance, and all the way through into all the cloud environments and so forth, and then into privacy, and then into supply chain and everything. But when it really comes back to it, I think you hit it right in the head. It's really about that governance and risk management, which brings us to our topic today, talking about GRC in our organizations. And what does your governance structure look like for your security program in your company?
Yeah, the Haggerty Insurance is, we became public company just about 2 years ago. And so the regulatory environment has changed a lot for Haggerty just in the last 2 years. So with us being public, and then we also have some relationships with some of the bigger insurance companies across America where we need to be ISO 271 certified and so forth. And so our GRC program here is really going through a transition period of being more important and actually more ingrained with processes with the business and with IT. So we are really in the transformation phase for our GRC program, just to step up to the challenges that the regulatory environment brings, as well as some of our key partnerships. The way we're structured right now is from a GRC perspective, we have three managers within each of those pillars. We have a governance, we have a risk, we have a compliance manager. They all report to me. We have to, our GRC solution is going to have to transform some in regards of what we're doing. We need to mature that as well. But certainly over the next 18 months, we're going to be really focused on GRC. How does that impact the business? How do we get control owners from the business and control owners from the IT side of the house more integrated with expectations of like ISO compliance and so forth? So I would say that, Todd, our GRC program here at Haggerty is in a transformation phase, which we need to mature in a big way in the next 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I really like that what you said, that you have three different managers that taking each one of those letters of GRC, and I don't think I've heard it put that way before. Could you just give a brief description of how do they differ in that, what is the governance person doing versus the risk person and the compliance person? Because we tend to lump GRC all together. So let's
Yeah,
I
so
think it'd be fun to divide those out, and what are those different pillars?
yeah, let's talk about that. So it's pretty simple in the sense of the pillars. So each one of those for us in the GRC is a different pillar. So if you first look at the governance pillar, what we're doing there with that is more on the policy, more on the framework type of thing. So at Haggerty, we've created what we call the Haggerty Control Framework, where we've done a lot of work bringing in many frameworks. So whether it's in the NIST, whether it's New York DFS, whether it's ISO 2701, PCI, HIPAA, and we use the common security framework to bring all those together in what we call the HCF, so that we can really test one set of frameworks, but certify on many. And so the governance piece is really looking at policies and standards and requirements and the frameworks so that we can hand that off to a compliance group such that they understand what things need to be done. So that's what the focus is of the governance, and get really requirements made for different projects, controls and standards, and really just making sure that the areas understand what we mean by the governance and what we're doing there. So that's the main responsibilities of the G part of it. And so a lot of governance and IT governance there from a controls perspective that takes place. On the risk side, there's really two levels there. We've got what we call the internal risk team, and we have a third party risk team. So our internal risk really looks at not only frameworks, but we have to do an ISO 27001 risk assessment and create risk treatment plans for the gaps that we might see there. But also looking at assets across the organization, whether it's an application, an infrastructure item, a project, and really creating some sort of risk assessment process, looking at that to see if, once we get done with the risk assessment, we meet back with the business areas to say, okay, what are the risk treatment plans? How are you going to mitigate this? Maybe there's an acceptance of risk that needs to be escalated. That's part of what the R team does. And then also from a third party risk standpoint, looking at new vendors, whether it be software as a service, a consulting firm, whatever that might be, really sending out questionnaires and going through that process with third parties to make sure that the risks that are posed by that are mitigated appropriately for us to actually continue business with them. So that's really the majority of the work that the risk team does. And then on the compliance side, like I said, with us being a public company and being insurance, we're highly regulated. So there's that. There's the ISO 27001 certified compliance, New York DFS, PCI. So they work really closely with the governance team to make sure the controls are basically covering all those types of compliance frameworks. But then their main responsibility is to work back out with the business, with the IT owners, to create process around the control and how those controls are being tested. And I think mostly that's where you get your basically your integration with internal audit as well. So the whole compliance thing has internal audit in it, control owner expectations, control owner training, the processes that we're using for control owners, and just making sure that we're compliant with the frameworks that we need to stay compliant with. So when you look across those three pillars, GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, those are the main aspects of each of those pillars here at Haggerty.
I really like that division because each of those things are important, and a lot of times I think we lump those things together. So what sort of risk framework are you using?
Right now we're focused on ISO 27001, and so what we're trying to do there is basically we have an annual risk assessment that we just completed with the ISO 27001 process, and one of the things that we do with that process from a holistic standpoint is to create risk treatment plans that we can be disseminated across the business areas and the IT areas based on scenarios. So those are high level scenarios, whether it's be a likelihood of a ransomware attack, whether it's a likelihood of a phishing attack or credential stealing, whatever that might be. That's one framework we're using, but then we also use a little bit of the NIST framework from a risk assessment standpoint. When we look at specific assets and so forth and the risk treatment plans for that, we kind of use like a NIST overall risk framework or approach to our risk assessment. So at the highest level, probably ISO 27001, but as we look at individual assets or projects, it's probably falling more of a NIST risk assessment type of
Mhm.
methodology.
Are you leveraging the NIST 853 type controls within that as well, or do you go more towards the CIS controls?
I would say so. Our HCF framework that we created is a combination of like NIST 853. It's a combination of CIS, combination of ISO 27001. So PCI. So there's a number of frameworks we've analyzed and come up with a standard framework for Haggerty. And the idea behind that, Todd, was that there's a lot of frameworks that basically insurance companies or any company that is in cyber business have to comply with. And so when you look at all these different frameworks, it gets very hard to really manage all of them if you look at them separately. So we spent a lot of time over the last year creating this HCF where we bring in all these different controls and frameworks from all these different types of regulatory things that are out there. And so that's been able for us to focus in what's important to Haggerty. So when we go to do like a holistic risk assessment, or if we do SOX compliance type of testing and so forth, we feel like we test the HCF that we can comply to many frameworks, not just one. But that's an ongoing thing too. It's like it's not once and done for HCF. We have to look at changes that are happened in the regulatory space, whether it's state regulations, whether it's a change to ISO, whatever that might be. We got to keep an eye on that as well to make sure our HCF is up to standards as well as current as possible as we move forward.
Are you looking at many of the privacy regulations and the AI regulations that are coming out?
We do have a privacy officer that we work with in regards of the regulatory things from privacy. So, for instance, the New York DFS is a kind of a privacy type of thing as well as cyber. So the privacy end of that, we work closely with our privacy officer to make sure that the controls are within the HCF as well. One of the things that we're embarking on from an AI perspective is integrating the AI regulatory perspective and frameworks into the HCF as well. But we are really just in the beginning stages of that. So our focus really over the next 18 months is the ISO 27001 certification. I think the AI part is something that we need to take a closer look at and actually move those types of controls within our HCF so that as we get closer to actually executing AI initiatives and so forth, that we bake that into our overall framework as well.
Do you find with external vendors that you're getting any kind of pushback with ISO 27001 or NIST frameworks or what you're asking them to do?
Yeah, so I mean, it's no different. It's kind of been the same for a long time, right? It's just like we have certain questionnaires. Our questionnaire is really custom questionnaire, and it's based off like depending on if it's a cloud type of thing or if it's on prem with CSA cake or SIG-Lite or something of that nature, depending on the risk and so forth. So we have a different type of questionnaires we'll send based on risk. But yes, certainly there's certain vendors that are certainly mature in this process and they understand it and they are very cooperative back with answers and so forth. And there are some pushback is like, well, you've asked this before. We can't share that type of report with you, whether it be a SOC 1 report, whether it be a vulnerability management report or a pen test report. There are some that really kind of keep that tight to the chest and so forth. And so that's been the pattern, for at least the last 5 years, and it seems to continue. So there's different things we need to do with that as well to report back to the third party risk holistic program. Say, okay, we were able to ascertain these types of things for review. We weren't able to do this, so we don't know. So we score those, based on what we are able to attain and analyze. And the more we know, the better we have as far as recommendation to the business as this is risk one that we should take.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see your largest compliance challenges?
Well, the largest compliance challenge really is just the nature of ISO 27001, right? I mean, when you say that you're going to be ISO 27001 compliant, there's a lot that goes into that. It's easier to say than to execute, and so we are challenged with that over the next 18 months. So our partnership with some of our national carriers that are on the multi-line insurance, they're going to expect us to be ISO 27001 compliant. And so Fortunate for me is that that's tied to a large business initiative, the idea of being ISO 27001 compliant. And so that also allows us the opportunity to upgrade our security program to the extent that if we are ISO 27001 compliant, it also helps the security of our overall program as well, so that we are able to have a better layered defense type of approach that involves the business, involves all the IT owners and control owners. So I think the challenge for that is okay, once we become compliant or we have certification, it's not a once and done. We have to continually improve the program. So I think the ISO 27001 for us sets a bar above and beyond some of the other regulations. Obviously with PCI, with New York DFS, with the state regulations from privacy, those are all part of the equation. But I think ISO 27001 actually is one that kind of sets the bar at a higher standard for us here at Haggerty.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great framework. In in other employers, I've initiated the ISO 27001 globally with different companies, and it's very interesting. Different countries, their viewpoints on that, but it is the international standard. And at the time, I had picked that because NIST seemed to be very U.S. centric, but now NIST has evolved into it's recognized globally as well. So I'm curious, the choice of 27001, how did that come about? Because for U.S. companies, it was the NIST framework, and I'm seeing more and more ISO 27001 coming out there.
We also do business in Germany. We do business in UK and Canada. And so the 2701 being an international standard, it actually makes sense to me. And my days at Country Financial, we were not 2701 certified, but we did have our policy based and our controls based on 2701 for the same reason, is that, it's really a standard that depending on where you're doing business, it would work no matter what. Now, to your point, NIST is has changed its approach in regards to that as well as we moved on with our careers here. But 2701, I think, must have been from that negotiation, the standard that was chosen. And so when I arrived here in November, that was a signed contract, and so that was certainly an expectation. So our 271 certification process needs to be completed by the end of next year. So we are right in the middle of preparing for that.
What new things do you see happening in the GRC space that we should be aware of?
Well, I mean, I think that, when you think about all the different GRC solutions that are out there, right? And so whether it's, Archer or ServiceNow or OnSpring or OneTrust, whatever it might be, I think that AI actually plays a part here in regards of, when you look at all the questionnaires we're sending and all the different back and forth between companies and so forth. And I believe that there would be repositories where many of this information is available. And whether AI plays a role in that, I think that's where I feel like changes will be made. We are stretched, as many companies are, to run find GRC professionals to run this thing, but then to think that the manual effort that's there today, even with the GRC solution, is still something I think could be more automated. And I think AI actually should play a role in that automation. So I would expect AI to play a bigger role in GRC as we move forward, and being able to do it more with less people, but still being able to rely on information that we're getting from companies as basically accurate and relevant to what we're doing with them as a third party arrangement, for instance.
Absolutely. The third party issue, we've been trying to tackle this for years, and we're still all sending questionnaires and prioritizing and putting things in tiers and
Yeah,
creating a lot of work for a lot of people.
yeah, it seems like automation and AI could play a role there. Because at the end of the day, right now, it's still kind of a handshake between companies. There seems to be more integration that could happen that would make that process less cumbersome and also more reliable as we move forward. And I think AI plays a role there.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, Greg. What final advice would you give to emerging CISOs, new CISOs, current CISOs, or experienced CISOs as they're going down the GRC journey?
Yeah, so great question. And when I first started, I thought, the whole notion of technical was the way to go. And GRC was, you can be compliant but not secure. We've heard that for so many years and so forth. One thing that, I feel like we're leveraging here at Haggerty, and it'd be my advice for, new CISOs or experienced CISOs, is that, if compliance is something that's mapped towards the business and so forth, and it's a business initiative that is important, that can be leveraged to actually improve the security of your overall program as well. So when you look at something from a certification or 2701 or whatever compliance structure that you're trying to follow, look for opportunities in there to also improve the security of your overall program as well from a technical standpoint. So I think that's the advice I'd give them, is that you can become more secure through a compliance initiative and through GRC. And I think that's where you need to really have the business skills, but also the technical skills to really do that mapping from the compliance frameworks into the technical implementations of things. It's not just all process, but it can also be, configuration and so forth, and putting process around that. So I would use the GRC platform to not just be compliant, but also to improve the overall security of your overall offering and your layered defense strategies. So that's what I would say to CISOs that I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years, that it's not, you're not, just because you're compliant doesn't mean you're secure, but certainly you can improve security by becoming compliant. So I'd kind of change that around and say, how can you make that more secure during your compliance journey?
Great advice. I've seen that in the government contracting space, where there was a big focus on compliance, and what that means is you're drilling down into all those security controls and making sure that you're actually executing to what those policies are. So I love that sentiment.
Yeah, it's something that certainly over the next 18 months at Haggerty, if we get to certification on ISO 2701, there's no doubt during that process we're going to be more secure as well.
Yeah, great thoughts. Thanks a lot, Greg. Thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, appreciate it, Todd. It's always great to talk to you, and great to see you as well.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, RegScale. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast, and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.